So I did what I could to get the stories, and there was, in my opinion, certain places that were the important nodes of a complex dynamical system, basically, a social network. And I particularly focused on the individuals who created these institutions, the Catalyst, the Hip Pocket Bookstore, the Barn, and the 20th Century Ensemble. Those four places were very important centers in this chemical reaction that produced Hip Santa Cruz.
When you say systemic, Ralph Abraham, you're talking on a bigger systemic kind of definition than most people think about. Having been a chaos theorist for many years.
Oh, yes. Well, system is one of those very overused words, and everything you think of associated with that word is actually the true meaning of that word. But I use the word more as official mathematical jargon. And so in chaos theory, also known as dynamical systems theory, a complex dynamical system is the main object of study. And that means you have a dynamical system, so that's a thing which is changing state, a state which can be measured in some mathematical way according to deterministic rule, and it orbits around like planets going around the sun. That's a dynamical system. So a complex dynamical system is another use of the word system, and it means you have a bunch of these dynamical systems which are connected up so that the state of one influences the state of another one. And so when in management science, for example, you study organization. Organization is a complex dynamical system in which there are nodes, so-called, those special systems which are subsystems that are connected up. Those nodes might be political parties or churches or the finance department, the police department, the fire department, and so on. Each one affects other ones and comprises a kind of a network which you could model with Tinker Toys. So you connect up golf balls with toothpicks, more or less, and you put a toothpick between two golf balls whenever they actually communicate and influence each other. Otherwise, no toothpick, you see. And since each one of these nodes is dynamic, that is to say, changing rapidly according to rule, then the whole complex or network or matrix is also changing in this complicated way. That's a complex dynamical system. So world cultural history, for example, is the biggest complex dynamical system. Or the politics of the United States, where you have the two parties, and then you have the additional parties, and then you have the pollsters, and then you have the media, and so on. The media affect the polls, affect the media, affect the voters, and these complex dynamical systems can be studied mathematically by a method involving computer simulation, where the computer simulates the entire network, and this is used to predict future behavior of the complex system. So Nate Silver might say that Hillary's going to win by 56% or something like that. These predictions are based on not the mathematics, but the human interpretation of the experience of watching the simulation. Because of chaos theory, the future behavior of complex dynamical system is not determined. So the predictions are like weather forecasts, can never really be trusted.
Ralph Abraham, thank you for that great definition of systems. And I want to say how much I appreciate your ability to take a mathematical concept and apply it to the world, like you were just giving us the examples of. I had the pleasure of being able to see you speak about, you called it the bolts from the blue, and they were over a long history of humanity, let's say 40, 50, 60,000 years of history, and where you see these perhaps nodes that bring up the entire understanding of the world in culture. Would you mind talking a little bit about that? And this is all leading up to Santa Cruz.
Well, I have these various books I've written, maybe not including this one, but I call them my non-mathematical books. And one, for example, called Chaos, Gaia, Eros, is an attempt to describe world cultural history. But what's the point? I'm not a historian, and in fact my knowledge of the infinitely large volume of data about world cultural history is very, very modest. But the thing is, each person sees history, or even their own history, from their own perspective. And my perspective is that of chaos theory. Chaos theory sees history differently. And maybe this different view is of interest to some people. One of the main focus of chaos theory are these so-called bifurcation moments. That is, when the behavior of the system undergoes a instantaneous change to a completely new behavior. In world cultural history, these moments, there are quite a few of them, and they're not usually the focus of attention. So in my view, in Chaos, Gaia, Eros, for example, I see world cultural history as 50,000 years worth or 100,000 years divided into different epochs. And what is of special interest to me is the bifurcation moment, the catastrophic transformation from one kind of behavior or world system to another. So in that view, I've looked at the history of Santa Cruz in the 1960s from the chaos theory point of view. And according to me, there is this major bifurcation or cultural transformation before and after the onset of hip culture. And there's another one maybe when hip culture disappeared.
So this bifurcation, you also use the term miracle.
Yes.
Would you mind describing your definition of miracle?
Well, when there's a major catastrophe like explosion of Mount Vesuvius and destruction of a city, or this mega fires like we're having now, a couple of them in California, these are major transformations, and we do not call them miracles. So the word miracle kind of suggests something good, like somebody was sick and then they were cured by a miracle drug. So in my perspective, ills of society were cured by a miracle drug in the 1960s.
Would you care to name the miracle drug?
Well, it's usually called LSD.
Maybe we could even use like a more broad term, the psychedelic movement?
Absolutely, yes, you could. The psychedelic movement, of course, began 30 to 50,000 years ago, or maybe longer, and different naturally occurring substances were consumed or somehow prepared and used by inhalation, by eating, by rubbing on the skin or whatever, by shamans or special spiritual leaders in cultures over the time. And I think there's an official theory of some people. Terence McKenna is one in his book, Foods of the Gods, that the bifurcations, the major cultural transformations in world cultural history, were each and every one of them precipitated by the ingestion of a new psychoactive substance.
And hence LSD.
LSD, of course, is a synthetic one, like what happened. LSD is a naturally occurring substance. But what happened after its synthesis by Alfred Hoffman in the 1950s that it became available and distributed in massive quantities, and therefore its effect on world cultural history was more massive, more global, and more sudden than anything that ever happened before.
It's fascinating. You're listening to Ralph Abraham talk about using his lens, chaos theory, to look upon the world, and also his book, Hip Santa Cruz. His book is actually a collaboration with all the people that he interviewed and was able to get transcribed and into this book.
Yes, I'm just the editor.
You're just the editor, the person who brings them together.
My royalty share is 5%.
Would you say you were the catalyst?
I was a catalytic agent, but I was actually precipitated by other catalysts, people who egged me on to do this. I'm the one who decided to accept the assignment.
Wonderful.